Hello everyone, my name is Warren Green. I operate a company called Global Farm and Ranch based in Canada. We, in conjunction with my wife Sarah Green, we have been in business for over 30 years. We specialize in bringing in farm labor, mainly in dairy, feedlot workers, grain farm workers, apiary workers, vegetable farm workers, all categories of agriculture. We've even went into bringing in, as of the last 2 years, bringing in agricultural farm mechanics, which has been very successful and in big demand. Now, I am a licensed consultant, and so is my wife, Sarah. And we're licensed in all provinces to recruit within Canada. So we fulfill the requirements of the Canadian government and the provincial governments as well. I'd like to introduce you to Alexandra, who's been an employee for Global Farm and Ranch for the last 2 years. And Alexandra, please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Warren. That's correct. I'm Alejandra. I've been working with you for the last 2 years, supporting the work permit applications, learning a lot about recruiting, about permanent residence applications. And you know that the rules change all the time, so we need to be updated and move forward with the new rules. Warren, there are some questions that employers have all the time. And one of them is, what is an LMIA and what is the process?
That's a good question. My phone rings all the time, and people want to know, what is an LMIA and how do I go about getting an LMIA? Well, an LMIA is four initials short of Labor Market Impact Assessment Application. And what that is an application which is submitted from the employer to Service Canada. It gives specific background about their organization, as well as why and what the duties would be of the foreign worker if and when they do come to Canada. Now, that application is prepared, we do prepare them, okay, on behalf of the employer. We designate an individual to work with that, more so that we do it, to look after getting all the documents that are required for the application. We then submit it to Service Canada. Now, getting an application usually takes 3 weeks. The biggest thing about the application is getting the documents ready. Example, you got to provide tax documents, usually your TD 100 or 125, or an attestation letter from your bank manager saying that you're in good standing. And now you have to get a housing inspection. You know, that is from your local health authority, or it could be the fire department, depending what province you're based on. But we help with that and get that all ready for you. So once we prepare the application, okay, we submit it to Service Canada, okay? And let's say the application, if everything's done right, usually takes 3 weeks if we have the employer doing his due diligence, getting his tax information to us. We submit it to Service Canada. They will then review your application. And what we're finding on the agricultural side, it's taking about 20 days for them to review the application. They will then send out a notice to the employer, and that employer, okay, will be instructed to book a meeting time with a Service Canada agent, and they will then have an interview with that agent.
Okay, Warren, and I have some specific questions. One of them is, how is the wage determined?
Yeah, well, the wage is determined by the government, and they've set up a bar, and it's low, medium, and high. So we have to meet the medium wage, okay, that they have set they've done it for every occupation in Canada and in every jurisdiction. So for example, somebody in the Maritimes might have to pay a dairy farm worker $15. They might have to pay them in Alberta. They've determined that the industry pays $18. It might be $18. But once we look at your application and we determine where you live, then we let you and we advise you on what the rate of pay would be for your particular area. Because that's very important. You want to know how much you have to pay.
And what about the transportation?
Yeah, for all foreign workers coming to Canada in the dairy, or in anything to do with agriculture, you have to pay their airfare to and from Canada. Okay, that's mandatory.
And what is the cost of housing?
Housing has become a very important area for the government. They now require you to have a housing inspection to make sure the housing is livable. And who does that? Number one, every province is different. Health authorities, fire departments in each area will look after whether the housing is fit to be livable, okay? Secondly, the only thing you can charge is $30 per week for housing. The biggest thing about the LMIA is very simple, okay? When employees call us, they want to know the time frame to get an approval. And if we get the documents and everything straight, I'm quoting people about 6 weeks to get an approval, okay? To get that interview. And I'm not going to say approval all the time because sometimes there's a denial, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But to get an interview, okay, is usually 3 weeks after submission of an application, and they will approve or deny it usually within 1 or 2 days after the review.
The employer is going to be interviewed, right?
Yes.
How does it work?
Well, the employer is invited to an interview with a Service Canada officer. They will go through your application. What I'm finding throughout all of the years, the biggest thing is, why didn't you hire a Canadian, okay, to fill the job? Because obviously the emphasis is on hiring Canadians for the position. Well, in agriculture, it's been pretty well determined that it's very hard, and it's a real necessary ingredient to our commodity, into our marketplace, to feed people in Canada and around the world. So they've determined right now that we do not have to advertise, okay, for that position that they're looking to hire. So we've determined that. So that's kind of right now on hold, whether you can hire a Canadian. But the biggest thing is, what are they going to be doing? What's their job duties? Who are they going to be working for? They can only work for whoever is named on that application. You cannot farm him out to your neighbor. Whoever that is named on that application, that's who he can work for, okay? What the wage is going to be, okay? It's going to be following the wage guidelines that came up with the medium wage for that occupation in that area. So that's already been determined, okay? The other thing is very important. How long do you want him? Do you want him 8 months or do you want him 2 years? The 2 years, you got to justify what he's going to be doing in January, February, March. Well, a lot of farms, they're just as busy in January, February, March as they are in May and June. Dairy farmers, as I stated earlier, and beef cattle workers and grain farmers, they're generally busy every day, 24 months of the year.
And is there a chance to be denied?
There's always a chance to be denied, okay? You just don't know. And it's sometimes the flavor of the government. Right now the flavor is, hey, let's get these approved, let's get the workers, let's get the food on the shelves, and let's go from there. One of the reasons that people generally are denied is the application was filled out wrong. They put the wrong wage in. They didn't submit, okay, if they were doing it without knowledge of how to do it, the right documents with that application. We have a specific process that we go through to make sure that, and we've been doing it since 1997, okay, in a similar format, that we make sure that our documents and our applications are seamless when we do a submission. So I would just like to say, look, I would just like to say in closing about an LMIA application. What Alex and I have just spoken to is just a general conversation about an LMIA. What we'd like to do, if you have specific questions, okay, that would pertain to your business, feel free to call us or email us for a free consultation.